Everything relates back to Madame Morrible. I think that if Wicked is the story of what happened before Dorothy dropped in, then Madame Morrible is the story of what happened before the wizard dropped in. Hey friends, it's Tyler. As you may know, I've been obsessed with the musical Wicked for the past 21 years, and now we finally have a movie, and my obsession has just gone. While I'm still obsessed with the musical, the movie has truly taken over my life at the moment. I cannot stop thinking about this movie. I cannot stop listening to the music. And the more that I think about this movie, the more in love with it I become. And I need to talk about it. I don't know if you guys need to talk about it, but I do. I will also let you know this video is full of Wicked spoilers for both Wicked Part 1, the movie, and the musical. So if you don't want anything from the musical or Wicked Part 1 spoiled, come back later. Thanks. So in this video, I'm going to talk about some theories that I have about the movie. Most of these revolve around plot changes or things that I originally perceived to be plot holes. What I've learned in the past is things that I have perceived to be plot changes or plot holes are really just an opportunity to ask why. Why did they do this? Why did they make this change? Why does this seem like a plot hole? And I like to think that 99% of the time, it is intentional, and I do believe that there are often ways we can do some kind of mental gymnastics to make it make sense. So here are some of my theories at the moment. Let's go! Okay, I will start with this disclaimer that in my personal opinion, you don't have to agree, but we have the novel, the stage musical, and the movie. And I think that these three things, although obviously they do have a lot of crossover, I think they exist on their own. Things that happen in the movie aren't necessarily along the same story that might exist just within the stage musical. And then obviously those of you who know the novel know that the musical is very, very loosely adapted on it. So I'll just keep that in mind. So these theories are about the movie only. So to begin with, I want to talk about the main plot changes from the musical that really stood out in my mind. For those of us who know the musical, we know that there were some changes, but as everyone is saying, this was a very faithful adaptation to the musical. There were very, very few things that were actually changed. The plot points that were changed really stood out in my head. Number one, and this is the biggest one for me, Madame Morrible is no longer the headmistress of Shiz University. And now we have this new character, Miss Coddle, who is that role. Now, I was sitting there in the theater. I was very, very lucky to go to the premiere. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, if she's no longer the headmistress, what does she do? Because I've always had many thoughts about Madame Morrible, but I always got from the musical that headmistress was her main duty, and then she only taught her sorcery seminar if someone magical was to come along. And we know from The Wizard and I, when she says, "Many years I have waited," that this may have actually never happened. She might have actually never taught this course before. Or if she has, very, very rarely. So in the musical, my opinion always was, okay, her duties are being the headmistress, and then if someone comes along, then she also does the seminar. So I was sitting there in the theater and I was like, what does she do then? Because if she's no longer the headmistress and she just teaches this course, if someone magical comes along, then she's just kind of there. So that was the first big plot change. The second plot change is the fact that Elphaba is not planning to be a student at Shiz University. In the musical, she arrives and she's there, and her father says he's only sending her there to look after Nessa. Whereas in the movie, she's not even enrolled in the school. And then she performs her magic and Madame Morrible insists that she enrolls. The third change was something that I will definitely admit, the first time I watched the movie, I thought was kind of a weird plot hole. And then the second time I saw it, I actually thought the same thing again. I was like, this still isn't really adding up to me. This is kind of just a weird plot hole. And that is, now in the movie, the Ozdust Ballroom is more a scandalocious place that is actually forbidden for students to go to. Students aren't allowed to leave after dark. Box says that it's forbidden. We're not allowed to do that. And then Fiyero says, well, once again, I see the responsibility to corrupt my fellow students falls to me. The trouble with schools is, the main reason when they first said that I thought that this was interesting is because we know that Madame Morrible goes to the Ozdos ballroom after Elphaba goes to her and asks her to include Glinda in the seminar. And I thought, wow, isn't Madame Morrible going to be like, oh, they disobeyed school rules and they left? But then also, wouldn't everyone be like, Elphaba, you ratted us out. You went and told a teacher and then she came. So that was kind of like a plot hole that I was like, I'm not really getting this. And then fourth, which is the biggest one we know, and again, this is a really big spoiler, so I'm letting you know right now. Wizardmania is now an actual show that we get to see Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel performing. The backstory of the Grimmarie with the Wise Ones and the Wizard's arrival. There were other changes that we can talk about in other videos, but those were kind of the four main changes that stood out to me when I saw the movie for the first time. And then I had this epiphany that all of these changes directly relate back to Madame Morrible. They all involve her in some way. And I started doing some mental gymnastics in my head, trying to figure out how this kind of all relates, and also what does this mean for Madame Morrible's character in the movie opposed to the stage show. And here is kind of the theory that I have settled on at the moment. This could change, but this is where I'm at the moment. So we know from the Wizardmania play that there were the magical wise ones who put their magic into the Grimmarie in a secret language that only a true powerful sorcerer would understand, a person with magical abilities. So my theory is that Madame Morrible was born with some magical ability. We know that she has the ability to control the weather to some extent. And that meant that either in herself or her family or others around her believed she must be the one who was here to fulfill the prophecy. She was given this pressure and this expectation that she would be the one to fulfill the prophecy and to read the Grimmarie and save Oz. And then when it came to her test of reading the Grimmarie, she couldn't do it. The Grimmarie didn't open for her, and she was not the one that the prophecy had foretold. Which, as we know, is a huge theme of Wicked, led to a lot of internal hatred, and she may have even been ridiculed for it. I believe she went, you know what? I don't need this Grimmarie. I am going to continue to develop my magical abilities myself. So she started working on her magic and her ability to control the weather, and inadvertently caused the Great Drought, which basically led to the demise of Oz. As the wizard says, when he got there, Oz was in discourse and discontent. And I believe that Madame Morrible led the whole idea that the animals were to blame for the drought, to mitigate blame from herself. And so people started blaming the animals, everything was in disarray, and then another failed magical attempt caused a storm which brought the wizard in his balloon. And then when the wizard arrived, she saw this as an opportunity to, again, mitigate the blame from herself. And she sort of created the idea of what the wizard was. And as we know, the wizard was a man who was just all too happy to be called wonderful and to fall into this. And I believe that it was Madame Morrible who made that happen. But as we know, the wizard is not the one to fulfill the prophecy, and I believe that Madame Morrible knew that the only one to fulfill the prophecy would be someone who was born in Oz and then would grow up in Oz. And so she took over Shiz, used it. The sole purpose of that school is to find a magical person who's going to fulfill the prophecy. This could also add to the fact that we see that at Shiz there is a lot of wizard statues and things celebrating the wizard. And when Elphaba performs her magic, we even see that a painting of animal professors has been covered up by the wizard. Which again adds to this idea that Morrible is trying to make the wizard seem like the all-powerful being. And so through all this, her objective is to find the magical person, use that person for their magic, and eventually rule Oz, or become the most powerful sorceress in all of Oz, equal to the Wise Ones, which she is not. And to me, that theory covers some of these plot changes and plot holes. So first off, that for me justifies why she's not headmistress, because first of all, she doesn't have to be. I also think it puts her in a better position to actually be controlling the wizard's moves and to be searching for this magical person, and without having to do all of the stuff you have to do as headmistress. In terms of Elphaba not intending to be a student, I think it also adds this really interesting layer of, it's almost like the fates, the universe, whatever, was trying to keep Elphaba away from this situation. Because if she had never gone to Shiz, then Madame Morrible would never have discovered her power, and etc, etc. So firstly, I think it adds a really interesting point of Elphaba's destiny, but also it's just another great manipulation technique that Morrible can use to get Elphaba on her side. There's that part when they're walking down the stairs hand in hand, and she's like, I will handle your father, welcome to Shiz. And is so kind and caring now that she has finally found her magical person. Now we get to the whole students aren't allowed to leave after dark, the Ozdust Ballroom thing. At this point, Morrible needs Elphaba. Morrible needs Elphaba so much, which basically means that she will just do anything to be on Elphaba's side. I think first of all, she really doesn't care about what the other students do. I don't think she is at all concerned about these rules that are set up. But I do think it adds that extra layer of, I will do anything that Elphaba asks me to. I'm not going to go to the Ozdust Ballroom and make a scene. When I saw it for the second time, when she is going into the Ozdust Ballroom, she doesn't make a grand entrance, and she's not like, hello everyone. She's kind of she's walking down the stairs, kind of looking, and she meets Glinda and Fiero at the front, and she kind of gives her the wand, and then she's gone. It does add another layer of, she needs Elphaba at any cost. Also, just a little side note, kind of. We do know from the novel that she was recruiting students at Oz as spies for the wizard, which justifies in What Is This Feeling when they're doing the combat scene, which I know many people say is also a reference to the cat fight scene in Act 2. It adds an interesting layer of what she's actually intending for these students at Shiz. So those are my main points surrounding Morrible, which kind of leads into the next thing I want to talk about, which is the Miss Coddle character. If you saw my last video, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of Keala Settle. I've seen her sing live. I went to her concert. We know from Greatest Showman and from Waitress and other things that she has this phenomenal voice, and I was very sad that she did not sing in part 1, and I was like, well, she has to sing in part 2. She has to. So how's this gonna happen? I started to think of this whole idea of her also being a puppet in Morrible's game. Morrible obviously wants the person who's going to be the head mistress of Shiz to be someone that she can control and someone she can influence. I think we get an impression from the movie that this Miss Coddle character is quite an impressionable person, someone who I think could be quite easily influenced. I believe that in part 2, Miss Coddle is going to become sort of leader in this revolution against Elphaba, the leader of the witch hunters. In March of the Witch Hunters, in the musical, we have Morrible saying, "Good fortune, witch hunters!" She's very much controlling them. And I believe that the Miss Coddle character is going to be another person whom Morrible has manipulated into fighting against Elphaba. That also means she gets to do some amazing singing for March of the Witch Hunters. So I actually hope that theory is right, because I love that song. I can just imagine her going, "Wickedness must be punished!" Except much better. It was obvious Miss Coddle had this attachment to Nessa through that, I'm sure, Bock. And I think Morrible is also going to use that, Elphaba is responsible for Nessa's death. She turned Bock into the Tin Man. She did all these evil, horrible things to these students who you loved and cared for. Okay, so that is all of my main thoughts at the moment about Morrible and Miss Coddle. Moving on. Now, this is something that I haven't seen many people talking about, and I'm like, people have to be talking about this. So if you are talking about this, please let me know. And that is the Emerald City is Disneyland. The first time I saw it, I felt that immediately. And I don't know if I was just seeing what I wanted to see, but the parallels were kind of crazy. What got me immediately is that there's this new intro to One Short Day, which I love. I think it's amazing. It sounds like every Disney fireworks intro I've ever heard. If you've been to Disneyland before, you'll know that often these shows there's like a choir, and that's what the beginning of One Short Day, when it's like, if you only have one shot. It sounds like a fireworks song. And then we get the shot of Glinda and Elphaba riding the train at the front, and you see the reflection of the Emerald City in the glass, and they're at the front. And I was like, monorail. Like, you take the monorail to get to Magic Kingdom at Disney World. And that's kind of like your point of entrance into the Magic Kingdom. That's how I felt. I'll get to the Wizard Disney parallels after. I started to think of what they were trying to say here. This can be interpreted so many different ways, but this is kind of my feeling. Theme parks are a place that you're only supposed to spend a day in, or a short amount of time. The first time you go to a theme park, in my experience, the first time, it is so overwhelming and magical and amazing, and you see everything and you take everything in on such a overwhelming, joyful level. And then the more time you spend there, the more that you start to see, oh, that's fake, that wall is fake. Or the more times you go on a ride, your brain starts to see the mechanics of how it's working. For me, I used to work at a theme park in Australia. And especially when you work at a place and you go there every day, you really start to see that everything is a facade, which is what it's supposed to be, which is the point of a theme park. It's this immersive thing that is supposed to take you away from reality. But the longer you spend in that, the more that it shows itself for what it is. And you start to see that it's actually all kind of, it's not what it's saying that it is. So that's what I got from that. Again, so many ways to interpret this. There is, in my opinion, no denial the parallels between the Wizard and Walt Disney. From the moment where he's like, come and see my model of Oz, and he says like, the Oz of tomorrow, which is exactly what Walt did with all the parks. Walt had all of these models that had working parts and had light up things, which is exactly what his Emerald City looks like. Then we get the show behind the curtain, and what really, really struck me is there's a part when he literally like flaps his hands and lifts up, which is an iconic Disney movement that he did with Tinkerbell in an intro. There's a remake of that intro in Saving Mr. Banks, if you've seen that as well. And this is like a whole thesis on its own. What I think is really interesting, which I hadn't really thought about it before, is that this kind of adds into my Morrible theory. I think the Wizard is a total narcissist, and I think he's only out for himself. I think that's very apparent. And as I've said before, I think that his indifference towards Elphaba and his current circumstances made it very terrifying. And I actually had a reaction to the Wizard that I'd never had before, which was just this really gross feeling, which I think was great, really added to the story. But I think the Wizard is, I mean, he's an inventor, and I think that he's a dreamer. I don't think he even has the capacity to understand. I feel like he's a fool. Like he doesn't have the ability to kind of understand the gravitas of this situation that he has landed into, controlled by Madame Morrible, as long as his ego keeps getting stroked, which is very disturbing in itself. Okay, for this video, I'm going to talk about one more theory. And again, this is actually like a very big spoiler if you don't know the musical. At the very beginning of the movie, when the monkeys fly out, before we see Dorothy and the others going back to the Wizard, we fly over a cloaked figure riding a horse away from Kiamako Castle. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we also did see this in a trailer as well. Like, not the same, but we did see a cloaked figure riding a horse in one of the trailers. My initial thought was that is Elphaba. It's Elphaba after she has just faked her death and she's riding the horse back to the Emerald City. And I thought about this, and then I was like, I actually scrapped that theory. I actually think that it's Glinda. And the reason why I think it's Glinda is because in the musical, the melting happens and Glinda goes to the hat and she sees the hat and she sees the green bottle. And then it transitions like instantly from the castle to the wizard's throne room where she confronts the wizard about the bottle. And before that happens, before the melting happens, Elphaba says, hide yourself, no one could know that you were here. So that justifies to me that she's hiding herself with this cloak. She's riding back to the Emerald City to confront the wizard. He goes off. And also, whoa, I really believe this now. I believe this theory because I just had an epiphany on the spot. There is a shot that we saw in the initial trailer. I think it played a couple of times where Glinda she gets in the bubble and she does this pose, which has been used a few times, and she's rising up. And she's actually in the Emerald City. Now I definitely think it's her on the horse. So I think she rode back on the horse, went to the wizard, gave the bottle, told him he has to leave Oz. Go get your balloon ready. He leaves. She gets into the bubble, flies, and then we're back to the beginning of the story. Okay, those are all my theories for now. As you can see, this is what my brain has been doing for the past couple of weeks since I saw the movie for the first time now. I would love to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts on these theories? And do you have any theories of your own? Is there anything else that we should discuss? I'm loving reading all of these threads in the comments, so please keep them coming. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do have more Wicked videos coming, so please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of those. I love you all, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!